Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's virtual plant clinic. Just a few minutes here. I'm going to let everybody get logged in and get their volume going and all that. Just a few quick notes for anybody who is joining us for the first time today. Welcome if this is your first time here. We will take questions possibly throughout the class. Sometimes we hold them towards the end. So please send those questions into the Q&A box, and I'll be sharing those with David when he's ready to take questions today. David is going to be covering the I talked about this with you yesterday and we were just chatting about it. How to discuss use like soil temperature and plant hardiness zones and all of that to determine the best times to plant, which will be a really interesting topic. David and I were just talking about the weather changing back and forth a lot lately. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you get started, David. And everybody, if you have any technical questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And remember, we are recording. So that's it. Thanks,
All
David.
right. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining Sally and myself here today in our virtual plant clinic. As Sally and we were just talking before the program about how crazy the weather has been. Now, we know that March in Virginia is unpredictable, right? They always say, hey, March was that in like a lion, out like a lamb. So they say, but even with the fact that our weather changes constantly as we transition, or sometimes call these shoulder months going from winter to spring. This year, I think, has been like none other. I mean, even people like myself, lifelong residents, are saying, this is really extraordinary. We're swinging back and forth from, hey, we've got weekends where it's 80, 85 degrees out, followed by snowstorms, and then, heavy rains and high winds. And as a friend of mine was saying, hey, we have like winter, spring, summer, fall, all on the same day. And so this kind of leads us to a situation like really just don't know what to do when we're trying to make decisions about, hey, it's gorgeous out today. It feels like spring. I want to get outside and things are blooming and I want to plant, but we're just a little uncertain exactly what to do. So I'll kind of give away the whole program here today. I don't know. I don't have answers for you. What I have are just some thoughts that we can explore and share. I want to look at some of the resources that are available and try to help us decide how to proceed from this point, and then just enable everybody to sort of make better decisions and choices as far as moving ahead at this time of year and over the next couple of weeks. So that's what it is. It's like I'm calling it planting time. Somebody else I was just talking to as I was coming, he said, well, that's March in Virginia. And I thought, hey, that could be also a good title for today's program. So I do have a few slides, not that many, only about 8 of them. So I'm going to have a short discussion on some of these kind of resources and stuff that are there. Then I brought all these plants in that I can show as examples. But I really want to intersperse this with as many questions as we can. I like to keep this casual, I like to keep it conversational. So I'll give you a little heads up right before we get to the end of the slides, but I will also encourage you right now. Hey, I'd love to hear from you and get you to share your thoughts and ideas about how are we going to proceed from here. So one of the resources that's available to us as gardeners, and this has a long history, it's well known to most gardeners, is I'm sure you've heard about the USDA hardiness zones. And what they're doing with these resources, with this map, is tracking the temperature extremes, in this case, the low extremes on an average year. So this allows us to predict, based on the history, what are the lowest temperatures that we can expect in a wintertime. So like this year, this past winter was pretty brutal, right? We had days that went down to even 5 and 6 degrees, depending where you were. So we did have extremely cold winters, but it's still also at the bottom end, this was within our norms. I mean, this was at the low end of our average range. Now, the way that you will find where the cold temperatures or the hardiness zone is for you is it's on a USDA, Department of Agriculture, has a website, and you can just type in a search, hey, put in hardiness zone map by zip code, I'm using the Fair Oaks zip code. I'm using the zip code where I'm broadcasting from right now, Fairfax, Virginia. But you would put your zip code in there and you'll get a map that looks similar to this. And where I am located, I'm trying to see, so that's Warrenton, Gainesville, Centerville, this black dot, that's where I'm sitting today. And we look across here, and that means that's putting me right here in about zone 7B. So most of our region, most of our gardening region around here is what's called zone 7. And the low temperature range on that means that we can expect, you know, going down here temperatures that, sort of 5 degrees, anywhere from like 17.8 degrees down to it looks like 5 to 10 degrees. So each of these zones are 10-degree increments, and the A and B are in 5-degree increments. So this allows you really, it's kind of a neat tool to kind of predict what we might see in the wintertime. Now, again, these are averages. These are not record-breaking temperatures or extremes, but these are the average in the lower range. This data is based on a 30-year time period. And one of the things that happens is, I've been living this all my area all my life is, we have, and over my lifetime, we've gone from being a zone 6 to being a zone 7. The way these numbers work, the higher the number, the warmer temperature. So Sally, I'm guessing you're probably down here in zones 9, maybe even 10, because you're down there,
9.
or your zone.
Yeah, 9B.
Yeah, so the lower numbers mean, hey, we're going to be in a colder climate, higher numbers, warmer. And essentially what I'm telling you is that in our DC metro area, we have moved from a 6 to a 7. And that's based on the past 30 years of data that's in there. Okay. Your other thing that I want to mention here before I move on is, so what I would say, your microclimate. Within that, you'll hear me talk about this a lot. That's just the general area, but your individual situation, your microclimate, whether your house faces north or it faces south, whether you're in an urban area where you have a heat island effect, or whether you're in a more open area, all of these things also will come into play. So you'll see a lot of variation within that. But in general, I'm talking here this zone 7 range, and that kind of gives us a little bit of an idea in terms of plant selection. What do I want to plant in my garden? Oh, so yeah, I put little numbers. So this was an example. I did a little search in this winter. Like I said, the lowest temperatures I found in Fairfax County was in January 27, 3.9 degrees. So we did go a little bit below that 5-degree minimum. So that did take us down colder than usual. This brings in, like I said, conversation a little bit about what we plant. So we talk about the weather, but how are those plants going to respond to the weather? Well, as we have moved into zone 7, we have been introducing a new palette of plants to you. And this has been happening gradually over the last 10, 15 years. Like I said, 30 years of data that we're basing on. So what you see at the garden center, because hey, gardeners, we always love what's new, what's novel. We like to have more choices to what to plant and grow in our gardens. We all love that. And so we're always kind of bringing new plants into us. So plants like this Alyssium, which is sometimes called a Florida anise tree. This is a plant that, again, 25 years ago, we wouldn't even think about growing. But it's one that we have been growing successfully in our gardens, let's say over the past 5 to 10 years. Another one I put in here, this soft caress mahonia. These are examples of what I call zone 7 plants. So we're pushing the boundary. These are plants that are probably commonplace down there where Sally lives, but they're pushing their northernmost margin limits up here. So when we have a winter that goes down to a little below that, and it starts creeping down to like that 3-4 degrees, like we were looking at in late January, in those situations, you might see these plants start to show damage or injury. So again, what you see going on there can also influence a lot about what you're planting. So these are plants that are available for us to grow, and that we sell and that we have success with, but your success is not going to be 100% rock solid. It might be a little bit variable depending on the type of winter we have, the conditions we have, your microclimate that's there. So I'm old enough to remember Fatsia. This was a tropical plant that we sold when I was in high school. This was a greenhouse plant. And we would sell it as a tropical indoor plant in the greenhouse. And it's still wonderful for that. By the time I would say I was in my early 20s, kind of college years, I knew of one garden in Northwest DC in a very sheltered area, had this microclimate that was able to grow this outdoors. It's a plant now that is, I'm going to say not routinely, but it's often planted outdoors, and it will often survive outdoors. But these are starting to push what I call zone 7, zone 8 plants. So they are really pushing the envelope on here. And again, they can be wonderful, exciting new additions to your landscape. But when you plant them, it's important you understand your hardiness zones and understand the importance of your microclimate, and also understand that these might have a little bit of risk. They might get damaged, but a lot of this stuff does come back. So that's stuff that we can think about in terms of selecting what to plant. Another kind of important weather consideration is we can have ridiculously hot, sometimes dry, wet or dry summers. So now I'm flipping to the other extreme of the spectrum. And there are many plants that are better adapted to cold climates further north, but we're in what we call this transition zone in this zone 7. But we'll take some of these plants from northern climates and see if we can grow them here. And where they're getting stressed out is the high temperatures. Now, there's not as much data available on this because there was really no such things like heat zones. But this, I still remember, is a legacy of Dr. Mark Cathy, who had been a longtime director of the U.S. National Arboretum. He started putting this idea forward, talking about their heat tolerance. And then it was really the American Horticulture Society that this picked up and actually produced the heat zone maps and the heat zone concept. So this data is not as complete. It was this data was taken over that 1974-95 time period. They just have not had the resources to update it. So it doesn't really capture, the last 20, 30 years of the climate data. So it's a little dated, but I think it still is helpful in defining this for us. So again, you can see the Beltway, going out to Fairfax. I'm talking to you somewhere right in this region. And what they're tracking are the days that are above 86 degrees. And the significance of that number is that plants in general, again, we know there's always exceptions, but most of the plants in our region naturally adapted to our climate and everything, they reach their photosynthetic maximum. They're really at their very best of temperatures about 75 to 85 degrees. When we start going above 85, the heat can actually cause some stress on the plants, and then they become less photosynthetically active. So I thought it was cool. They didn't just pick a random number. This is based on the physiology of plants and how they're going to grow. So when we get above that 86 degrees, a lot of our temperate plants begin to stress out. Examples of that might be like Canadian hemlock and blue spruce. So these plants, you can grow them in our area, but when we get extended, prolonged heat, it starts to put a little strain on those. And so again, here in the transition zone, we've got the biggest palette of plants imaginable, most diverse plant communities in the world, but they're going to be stressed usually at one end of that extreme or another. So again, these are just all resources I want to put you through to think about in terms of what we want to plant. Now, the next thing that I want to discuss is when to plant. So there's a lot that goes into this. I think it's kind of cool. We talk about the temperature extremes, but the other that we're faced with right now is deciding, okay, when when is it really spring? When does it get here? When can I start planting? So this is, again, this is through the National Gardening Association. I think they have the best descriptors, the best charts that I found as far as what our average last frost date is. So again, these are averages. This is based on, again, I think this is like over the last 25, 30 years. And so this stuff gets updated, it gets reviewed, and then that data is put in there. This is also one of these things that's driven by your location. So this would be similar to the hardiness zone maps where you put your zip code in there. And what you're looking at here, these are dates for my zip code. Your zip code could be totally different. So this is an example, but I encourage you, you go to this National Gardening Association, just garden.org, they'll have a last frost date, plug in your zip code, and then you have good information to work on. So what they point out here is 32 degrees is a freeze, right? That's where water literally starts to turn to ice and freezes. 36, you could still have a frost that's in there. If it's a clear night and temperatures start to drop, you can literally lose heat off of the surfaces at such a pace that then you actually get a frost, even though it's not reached freezing temperatures. So the way they present it, and I agree with all this 32, 36, this is kind of our danger zone that's right in here. And across the top, this is sort of the probability range. So what I would say is, if you look at this, I'm going to look at the freezing, the last 32 degrees. So on March 30th, what are we today? The 25th. So today we're 25th. What that's saying is, okay, we're not even, we're still going to have a frost. Okay, that's based on historical records. We will still get, most likely, we're going to get a freeze. So on March 30th, we reach a point here where we'll be at, there's a 90% chance of having a freeze. If I zoom down here on April 7th, there's a 70% chance we're going to have a freeze. If I zoom down here, April 16th, now it's 40% chance that I'm going to have a freeze. So these are what I'm saying. You can see these numbers going down, but it's not until we get to sort of this late April, the end of April, that I say, okay, now I'm down to, yeah, it could happen, but it's pretty unlikely. And we don't want to wait until April or May to start planting. So it's not an exact number, but a lot of times I'll be talking about, hey, well, let's start planting tender stuff. Maybe in this mid-April period, we're past the 50% mark. If I say our frost date is like April 20, that means we could still have a frost, but we're down to, well, it's like, hey, a 30 or 40% chance that's there. But right now, today, the likelihood of freeze and frost is still to be expected. That's in there. So look at these dates, because if you're taking tender plants that are not frost tolerant, and trying to put them out under these temperatures, you're taking a risk that's in there. And right now, I'm saying you're taking a pretty high risk. So this different data, I want to sort of try to give you examples of why this matters and how it works for us or works against us as gardeners. I was so proud of my hydrangea. Look, you see, in 2024, that was the best year we've had for hydrangeas. Not just me, but everybody in the area. Everybody's hydrangeas never looked better. But we had a very cool, moist, kind of steady, consistent temperatures that year, and everybody's just having wonderful luck with the hydrangeas. It was fantastic, right? So that's in the distant past, right? But I wanted to start on a positive note. So then let's say that was so nice. 2025 rolls around, and what happens is in 2025, we start the year out. March is wonderful. The buds start breaking, the leaves start growing in March. But then in early April, we had one of these unexpected freezes. If I recall correctly, I didn't look it up, just from memory, I think it's spring of 2025, and I believe it's like early April, like April 9. Boom, woke up one morning, it was 19 degrees. So what happens? When it drops down that cold, the tender growth, these newly emerging flower buds, they all get frozen. Boom. There go my flowers, right? It's so disappointing when that happens. So at that point, last year, I decided, well, that happened. Can't do anything about it now. Buds got frozen out. No flowers this year. So I pruned the plant back heavily to try to thought it was getting a little too big. Now's the time I'm going to rejuvenate it, renew it, get it back looking good. And then that was, and that brings me to today. I'm trying to follow my story. So we started 2024. We had a bummer of a year in 2025. That brings me today. So here we are, March 9. And you guys, this is recent memory. This is that weekend. We had 3 days where it's 80 and even made up to 85 degrees in March. And what happens? See these little buds starting to grow out? Boom, boom, boom. All these little new buds growing. So these are leaves that are emerging, but buried in that bud is also where the flowers are existing. So I thought, okay, I've been through this before. I'm not going to get set up again, because I look at my weather and I said, oh, but 3 days later, we're going back down into the freezing temperatures. And I think we even had a snowstorm in that during that same week. So my attempt is I went and I put this frost cloth over. It looks a little rough, but just tied it up with some twine, tried to bury it in there. And so my attempt is like covering the plants to try to protect those flower buds. So this is one of these things where these crazy big fluctuating temperatures can hurt us. Things start to come out. Like I said, I remember when cherry blossoms used to flower in April. Now they routinely flower in March. And oftentimes you get those plants coming out, you get late freeze, and then that can really kind of, hey, mess with you when cherry blossom parade comes and goes and the flowering is already done. So that's kind of where our frost dates come into play and make it also difficult for us as gardeners in this region, is recognizing that if I have some of these things coming in, late frost coming, I can dodge that. I can put frost cloth over them if I can bring plants inside to move. But we're in that time period, if you remember back to that chart I was showing you, where anything can happen. Again, 80 degrees today, but I think they're even predicting freezing temperatures come back to us come Saturday. So what do? I'm not sure. We'll talk about more, and I've got some examples. One other little thing I want to talk about. I think this might be my last slide before we go to questions. Yes, so I've just got like a couple quick slides here. And then I really do want you, even now, we don't have to wait, start sending you questions. Let me know what's going on in your gardens. If you know any tips or tricks, this is a good opportunity to share. All the stuff I've been talking to you about up here are really the air temperatures. Technically, I think they're taking them at 6 feet off the ground, to get trying to get what would be the ambient air temperature during calm conditions. So a lot of effort goes into this data. But one of the things that matters most in plants and gardening is going to be soil temperature. When I start talking about planting dates, when we're going to get seed germination, when we're trying to predict when weeds might start to emerge, when we're trying to predict a lot of what's coming, this is most often based on what your soil temperature is. So this is another wonderful resource, and I've shared these many times, but keep putting it out there. Greencast Online, this.com. This is a commercial operation there, and they make products for agriculture and horticulture and stuff, and they'll try to sell you some of their products, and they're good. Nothing against that. But none of that's required. You can go to their soil temperature map. Again, I'm putting in my zip code that's here. I did this 2 days ago. No, I did this right 2 days ago. So Tuesday afternoon, I went in there, pulled this map of what soil temperatures. This is right where I'm located right there. And this is fantastic. So they give me current 24-hour average, and I'm often looking at the 5-day average. So that was 2 days ago. With the sunshine that we had yesterday and the sunshine we're having today, has probably gone up significantly. But It's fun. You can kind of track that. This is a good predictor, really, how some of your plants are going to do, and really becomes important when we start talking about seeds. So things like seeds and bulbs. What I would tell you is if you're looking at, let's say, dahlias that are in this image here. So dahlias, wonderful, beautiful, glorious flowers. I encourage you to grow them and plant them. Fantastic as cut flowers, but they need warm conditions. Particularly, they need warm soil. If you went out and put it in the ground today, its soil temperatures are like 55 degrees. They're just going to sit there. They're not going to grow. And the longer it sits there without growing, the greater the risk is that you're just going to have root rot problems. So often, dahlia growers are going to tell you, hey, let's wait until our soil temperatures start getting more in that 65 to 70 range. Then I can put them into warm soil and boom, they take off and start growing. Right? This has a lot to do also with our planting dates on seeds. While you can grow things like lettuce and carrots, any of the greens, Swiss chard, kale, spinach, they will all germinate and grow under low soil temperatures. Potatoes, things like at 50 degrees or something. And I'm like, hey, you're already, I'm not late, but you could have planted those 3 and 4 weeks ago, even. But you could have started those some time ago and just keep planting. They're going to germinate and grow, and they thrive under the cool temperatures. But if you're talking about tomatoes and peppers and some of those things, that's soil temperature cucumbers. It's still too cold to put them out. They are really going to germinate better when we start getting up there, again, that 65, 70 kind of degree temperature range. This information that I'm sharing with you, oftentimes it's on the back of the seed package. So a good seed producer is going to give you that information so you can make good decisions on it. But these are places that you can go and get information, like we talked about, where my cold hardiness zones, my heat hardiness zones, what's my average frost date, what are my soil temperatures. And this isn't complicated. Again, this is stuff like professionals like me might do to track. But if you love gardening, which you must if you're tuned in here today, you can go and you can get this data and really play around with it. And it's going to allow you to make better informed decisions. So if you walk into the garden center right now today, and I really hope that you do, you're going to find like where our nurseries getting jam packed full. We're getting deliveries, we're getting plants in here, we're getting stuff every single day. What we're doing is we're trying to be responsible to provide you plants that you want. Mostly what you see coming in are plants that can tolerate some cold weather, and we're alerting you to it. So you might see things like snapdragons. Snapdragons, they can tolerate a frost. You could put them in the ground now, and even though we know we're going to get a frost and quite possibly a freeze, these plants will tolerate that. They do fine with cold temperatures. If you look at plants like these, the petunias, the million bells, they will tolerate some cold temperatures. Like they probably do pretty good, like even down into the 40s. But if I see that, wow, we're going into freezing temperatures predicted, then I'm going to take this hanging basket. I'm going to bring it inside to protect it. You can see all this wiring cable up here. We're fortunate that we just have these open roof greenhouses, and we can open and close them. So a nice pretty day, we can open it up, let the sun shine in, and have a beautiful environment. And if we see a risk of cold temperatures, we can flip a switch and close it up. So we're able to manage these things, but it's something that you need to be aware of when you're taking them home. You got to watch after this kind of deal. And like I said, if that forecast comes, which you should expect at this time, it's going to happen. From what I saw, the 10-day prediction, it might even happen for us, I think, around Saturday. But keep an eye on these things and be flexible, be ready to adjust. We don't really know what's happening in our lives too much one day to the next. So I'm just like, just be aware of what's happening to you and be ready to kind of adapt to it. So that's enough of me talking. Let's see if you guys have any thoughts about this, what to do. We have any comments or questions come in, Sally?
We do, and everybody, please feel free to submit any questions you have on this topic. Other topics, if they come up, we'll be happily get to other topics if we have time. So please feel free to submit any plant-related questions you have. Um, First question, David. At my retirement community, we have many large planters that are 32 inches wide and 24 inches deep at the center. They're filled with potting soil, not garden soil. We're selecting some shrubs for 2 zones colder, but what about bulbs?
2 zones colder. Okay. Um, so a lot of bulbs do better in colder climates. So if I tell you most of your spring bulbs, like tulips are a classic example of tulips, we're like hitting the southernmost boundary on them, and tulips are kind of marginal in our climate because it's the heat that cuts their life short. They come up, they're blooming for us in April, but they never really get to finish their whole bloom cycle out. So most of your bulbs, your fall planted bulbs, would do quite well. And so I'm talking about crocus daffodils, the hyacinths, all the stuff you plant in the fall. The bulbs that you see in our store today, which are going to be things like caladiums and dahlias, they would do well in your planters, but they are not cold hardy plants. Gladiolas, these things, if I'm understanding your question correct, probably not a good choice, or they would just be a short-term choice. They would just be for summer color, but they're not going to persist or survive through the winter, especially above ground, because your containers being up above ground, they're exposed, they're greater exposed to the elements and the extremes that's in there. Anyway, so I think I got that right. If you're planting bulbs in there now, they're just going to be for the summer. The ones that you put in the fall, though, they should be reliably winter hardy and do well.
Okay, perfect. So if you're looking for something cold hardy, go with the fall planted bulbs.
Yeah.
Um, Next question. How does this influence fertilizing with hollytone? Is there a right time frame for that?
So most plants have started to grow, right? Most of you look around, you can see like some of the spring flowers emerging, some of the plants beginning at the leaf out. So most of the time, I'm going to say this is an excellent time to fertilize your plants because we're right at the very beginning of the growing season when they can actually utilize those nutrients. Now, there are some plants that won't start till later. So when you say hollytone, you think of azaleas and rhododendrons, mountain laurels. They're on a little different growth cycle. So azaleas, for example, might flower for us in April, but you don't actually see any growth begin until after flowering, kind of as we go into that late April, May time period. So I would tell you, look at the plants, follow their direction. I actually like to see buds swelling, flowers or leaves emerging, and that tells me, okay, we're there now, and that's a good time to flower. Like crepe
Okay.
myrtles, they don't start growing till the very end of April or early May. So that would be an example. I'm going to wait on that, and I'm going to wait, and when I see signs of life, then I think that's the ideal time to fertilize.
Then you fertilize. Okay. Um, Fall blooming camellias really took a hit. Do you just cut off the brown leaves?
So fall blooming camellias, they took a real hit. Uh, they will recover. Those damaged leaves will drop off. They'll set buds. They'll bloom for you again next fall just on their own. If you do nothing to it, they'll recover on their own. It's really what I expect to happen. You may not see signs of recovery until we get into late May or early June. So my best advice would be I would be patient, hold off on doing any pruning or cutting right now. Again, watch the plant. When you start to see some signs of recovery, when I start to see some of that new growth come out, at that time, I think you can make better decisions about what to prune and what to keep.
Okay.
And same thing, we've also been advising, you could also fertilize at that time, maybe to aid in their recovery. But I think everything's coming back. It will recover.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. All right, we just had a lot come in. Sorry if sometimes I'm like, whoa, okay. What herbs can be planted now?
Good. I'm going to take that as a little bit of a lead in because I have some of these vegetables and stuff around me as examples. So there are cool season plants. There are plants that tolerate and thrive under cold temperatures. So, for example, on this corner of my desk, I brought in some parsley and cilantro. Well, it's so you have to see, but things like parsley and cilantro, they thrive in the cold temperatures, and you should absolutely get started on those. I've had pretty good success with dill and fennel, even under colder climates. What you don't want to plant are things like basil, which we actually have in stock, but we bring those inside the store. We don't leave them out in our greenhouse. They're very sensitive to the cold. There are perennial herbs, things like oregano, mint, rosemary, lavender. Those things, the perennials, I'm totally confident putting them out there. What happens? I'm trying to see if because I went to this. This is a cool weather plant. This is arugula. And what happens is when it gets warm, it likes the cold weather. And when we're gardeners, we eat the tender foliage, the leaves on here. When we get hot weather, like we're vacillating back and forth, that triggers a flowering response. So your arugula that you want to grow for the greens suddenly goes into this flowering mode that you can see up. This is its response to high temperatures. So our concern with putting cool season plants in is when it gets hot, they want to bolt. This is what we talk about. Now it goes into its flower production. We don't have the soft succulent leaves as much. They get bitter and stuff, and it kind of brings an end to the season. So we're at a point where you can still successfully plant and grow the cool season stuff a little bit early for the warm season plants. But yeah, tons of stuff out there that you can and should grow. Even lettuce that thrives in the cool temperatures, but it will bolt in the heat. If you have plants that are kind of sensitive to that, a little bit of light shade is one of the things that we can do to manage and keep our plants a little cooler if they're going to be sensitive to the heat.
Okay.
So
Next
long answer,
question.
but I did me a chance to show off some of my plants.
You have some, I was remarking that before we joined the class. We have a lot of good plants there today. Um, is this a good time for transplanting shrubs and perennials like ragwort, or is this also plant dependent?
Uh, you can pretty much transplant anything now. I love to move or transplant when we are either dormant or in the very earliest of their growth. It's less disruptive. So that's pretty universal, whether it's ragwort or anything else in your garden. Take advantage of the cool temperatures. There's still a lot of them in dormancy, and this is a good time to do that transplanting.
Okay. Next question. Is soil temperature any different for potting soil compared to garden soil? So if it's in a pot versus in the ground, is there a noticeable difference?
Yes, there is. There would be a difference, and I don't own a soil thermometer, but I guess if you're really going to nerd out on this, you could. But potting mixes, because they're lighter, they're more aerated, they're not as dense, plus being above ground in a container, they will generally be warmer than the ground temperature is. Now, I'm just trying, it depends really on the time of year, because the flip side is in the winter, they'll get colder
Colder.
than the
Yeah.
soil temperature is. But right now, with the conditions and everything, they're probably going to provide you a warmer soil temperature than what you'll get in the actual ground. But
Okay.
I'm doing a little guesswork on that. It would depend on exactly
That
what
makes sense since it doesn't have all the insulation around it.
right.
What soil temperature is best for planting French thyme, basil, and tarragon?
Like the thyme and the tarragon, I'd say go for it now. I think we're there. They're not. because when I'm looking at my map, if I remember, said they were like at 57 degrees, and plus if you could put it down now, they may not actually germinate or may not sprout until our temperatures get closer to like 60 or 65, but we can do that. Like I said, basil, you could start that indoors, and this is one of the advantages to people when they start growing seeds indoors, because now it's a climate controlled environment. I can get a head start on that. But if I was going to direct sow them into the soil, you want to wait until our soil temperatures are pretty much getting up closer to 70. So that might even be the end of April or early part of May.
Okay. Next, any advice on what to do with gardenia that's looking pretty rough after the cold? Would you wait to cut it back until you see if it flowers?
Yeah, with all those plants, again, because the gardenias, like I said, that's kind of my zone 7, zone 8 plant.
Yeah.
We're really pushing the boundaries on that. And again, depending on how well established it was in microclimate, they can get beat up pretty bad and sometimes even outright killed. You won't really have a full, complete answer on that probably until end of May, early June.
Okay.
Uh,
And same for, we have a couple questions here. Lots of winter damage this year, I know, because
yeah,
of weather. Rhododendron, camellia, basically the shrubs that have winter damage, you're gonna have to just wait a few months.
that's what I'm advising is
Okay.
just be patient, give them a little
Okay.
bit of time. When you see signs of growth, then you can make better decisions of what to prune and so forth.
Okay. I just read this question. It skips, but I just love this because I'm the
If
same
it's
way.
not growing by June, then I think we need to have a
Yeah,
conversation
then
about
there's an issue.
removing, right?
Um, this one makes me smile because I do the exact same thing. I'm an over enthusiastic seed starter, so I started kohlrabi early that I've already put in the ground. Was that too early? It
I
was
think
about two
kohlrabi,
weeks
you'll be
ago.
okay. No,
Okay.
kohlrabi will take some cold temperatures. Uh, if you see like a freeze, I mean, if we should be going down, really down even to like below 32 or definitely if it should happen into the 20s, if you could throw some frost cloth over it or something, that would be helpful, just as insurance. But kohlrabi will take cold weather.
Okay. That's good. Yeah, I tend to just be like, ah, it'll be fine. And then sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. Um, let's see, not kohlrabi, just whatever I'm planting. I'm trying to plant lettuce and spinach.
Do it.
Okay.
Boom,
Can you
you're on.
go over, I know we do a whole class on this, so we may not be able to fully cover this. Can you go over three steps to start the steps to start indoors and move outdoors? I started them on a damp paper towel until they sprouted. Once they sprouted, I moved them to a veggie starter kit with potting soil and a cover. They're about 3/4 of an inch now. When do I move them outside? And how do I harden them off?
So this isn't really helpful, but I'll say I'd tell you just direct sow those. So it's not something, I mean, you can start them indoors, but those are all plants that thrive in the cold, and you could have started planting outdoors directly. But what you are talking about now, and this is pertinent to our discussion, is so plants have to acclimate to their environment that's going on. And plants do acclimate and adapt to the conditions that are there. It's an interesting study I was looking at plants under extreme heat. And they were looking at a type of aspen tree in Arizona on ridiculously hot temperatures. And literally within 2 days, they were able to measure where the plants started forming a thicker, heavier cuticle layer to better withstand the heat. What you need to do was, even though I'm saying like spinach and lettuce, they're very cold hardy plants, but they've been indoors and they have not had time to acclimate to outdoors. So first thing that I would say, because this is what always gets me, is wind. Wind will really beat up and desiccate and dry out the young seedlings. They're not prepared for that. So keep them sheltered where like you have a wall or a patio or a porch or something like that. They can kind of buffer them and shelter them from the wind. Um, I think you can put them outside, watch our nighttime temperatures. From what I was looking at, our nighttime temperatures are still saying, you know, 30, I mean, whether 40, 50, 60 degrees this week. They could even stay outdoors, I'm going to say, as long as our temperatures are staying above 50. That's a very safe range. If it looks like it's going to drop below 50, maybe you bring them back inside, just shelter from that cold, then back outside. After you've done this for a few, literally just days, let's say 3 to 5 days, they should be, that's what we talk about, hardened off. By that time, these plants should have acclimated to the conditions where now, hey, they're toughened up and they're ready to go outside. I'm so glad you brought this up because this is why I brought some of our plants in. So you look at this bleeding heart, beautiful, early flowering, dicentra, already in bloom. This is not supposed to happen this early. But these plants we're buying from commercial growers that are producing them in unheated greenhouses. So when you come in and you see a plant like this, it's ahead of schedule because it's grown in a sheltered environment. This is like we were talking about with your seedlings, grown indoors. We have these open roof greenhouses. We are acclimating and adapting them into our house. But if it's like a fresh delivery, this guy may not be like quite ready to put out and face the cold. So just like your spinach and lettuce seedlings, a plant like this, I would be hesitant to take it home and plant it in the ground. I would buy it because I love it, but then I might keep it in the pot, keep it, like I said, in this kind of sheltered area, acclimate it the exact way you would your seedlings before I actually put it in the ground. So you'll see that happen in our garden center as well. So I'm glad you asked that question.
Okay. Next question. When we say, like, I think this is about planting. As soon as the ground is soft enough to dig, around when is that usually, or when should you start checking?
So let's say we're talking about mostly trees and shrubs that are perfectly hardy, adapted to the heat and the cold that's around us. You don't, I'm not worried about these frost dates or heat dates. If I'm thinking like, hey, I'm a boxwood or something like that, then we'll say, hey, plant as soon as you can dig the ground. So this winter, it got really cold in December, from the very early December, which is unusual. We were buried under snow creep for 2.5 weeks, and I guess that was probably sort of like in early January. So this one's saying you go now. I mean, by the time we got to March, I would say the ground was like workable. So when they're saying as soon as that ground is ready to dig, so that would definitely say now. And if you're talking about putting hardy trees and shrubs in, you can really plant them any time of year, except if the ground is really frozen because you just are not able to dig and prepare the soil.
Okay. So next question. When would you plant lavender?
I would feel perfectly safe planting lavender now. Again,
Okay.
I'm going to put a little clause on that saying, again, many of the plants that are coming in now, they have not been through this whole acclimation hardening off process. They may have just been received here 1 or 2 or 3 days ago. So if you see a lot of tender new growth on there, I would be careful. So again, I brought this Virginia bluebell in, native plant. They're just starting to bud up outside in the forest. But something like this, just because it's come out of that protected sheltered greenhouse, I want to give this a few days to kind of acclimate before I actually stick it in the ground. Uh, and I'd also look at the weather forecast because as soon as I'm saying, I don't think there's anything too threatening in our landscape right now. So again, lavender is pretty reliably winter hardy. We'll take a frost. It's just not going to go, 10 degrees would be a bit much on it, but I hope that we're past that.
Okay. Next question. When can I move a potted osmanthus outside?
Oh, you can do that today.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. Is it too late to direct sow lettuce and spinach?
Uh, so absolutely you could do lettuce, no questions asked. Where I'm hesitating is spinach takes a little bit longer to develop. If I wanted to try spinach, I'd try to put it in sort of a light shade because what we are going to face is as we start moving into April, May, by June, when it starts to get hot, it's probably going to go into this bolting process we talked about. So we've got kind of a short growing season on there. Lettuce grows so quickly. No hesitation on that. If I was doing spinach, just because I love it, I would go for it, but maybe be prepared if it gets hot. You have a little light shade on it. If you've got the right environment, you could certainly do that.
All right. Next question. Oh, wax begonias. Are they cool weather or warm weather plants? They're warm weather. Is that correct?
They are, but I'm telling you, wax begonias, though, it's one of the reasons we love them so much, is because they were pretty sturdy plants. They'll
Okay.
go under kind of both extremes. I would feel I would be a little cautious about them. My concern with them is if like, and we know we're going to face a freeze. Historically, we're still in that range where freeze is likely. That's one that if you see freezing temperatures, you need to be able to cover it and protect it. If you're not ready to put the protection on, then let's wait a little bit longer.
Okay. This last question we have. When to plant a spring tree? Will they survive the sudden heat that can occur in May, or do you wait until the fall?
Oh, you should plant now. There's no reason to wait. What happens when you talk about sort of the sudden heat of a lot of times that might cause like their blooms to drop or something like that. I'm not talking about the plants dying or withering, but it can shorten or diminish kind of the beauty of it because some of these plants, again, it's so weird, we've had sometimes where we've had like steady cool temperatures, and I think it was maybe probably 2024, the year I had such beautiful hydrangeas. We had cherries, dogwoods, red buds, and even hydrangeas like all flowering at the same time. That's like unheard of for us. That never happens, but it did happen that one spring because we had kind of cool, consistent temperatures. What I'm talking about is if you suddenly jumps up and gets hot, your plants will be okay, but it may cause them to shed their flowers or age prematurely, something like that. But that shouldn't stop you from planting. It's just a part of gardening. It's part of life.
Okay. All right. We've had one more question come in. My raised garden beds are in direct, full, all-day sun. Oh, we've had a few guys. That's good. Keep sending them in, guys. We'll keep going because we've got a few more minutes. Uh, my raised garden beds are in direct, full, all-day sun. Do you sell some sort of canopy that allows part shade or filtered sun? Any thoughts on how to provide some shade? Do we sell canopies like that?
We did. I don't know if we currently have them in stock. We'd have to look. So you can buy shade cloth, and we did, but I think because we have less room, I don't know if we may have discontinued that. But you can buy shade cloth that might be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70%. You can buy it by the density of shade. Of where I'm hesitant is we sold that in the past, but I don't know if I have it in stock today. So you can check with us. But if not, if you go online, yeah, I mean you look at and you'll buy it by density. So if I say like 30, 40% shade is very little shade, that's just a light softening. If it's really an incredibly hot and you want to significantly drop the temperatures, you're probably going to be looking at like it might even be a 60%, 70% shade. But usually, if like you're on a website, they'll kind of even help you through that.
Okay. Is it too late to trim my fig tree?
I would keep trimming to a minimum. And this really doesn't have a lot to do with the weather. Like if you had some dieback or dead stuff. But what will happen is figs in our climate, they'll usually have like two flowering seasons. The first flowering season usually produces the best fruit. If you prune it now, you're depriving yourself of that first crop. And the second crop may or may not mature depending on the weather. So um, you won't hurt the plant if you prune it now. That does not hurt the plant, but it may reduce your harvest. So you can decide what's best. I know I got some people that have so many figs they don't know what to do with them. So if I say, oh, it's going to diminish your harvest, they don't care.
I have a fig tree like that, but we have to compete with all the animals for our figs. So we'll see what happens. This is our first year with it. Um, First year we moved into the house after the figs bloomed last year. And there were birds and all kinds of animals eating the figs. When is the best time to prune boxwood?
I do that right now. I
Okay.
like to do that. I mean, hey, I pruned mine 2 weeks ago, but we were still in that window. Uh, I would really like to get it done before the end of April. The sooner the better. Kind of
Okay.
semi deadline on that.
Okay. Let's see here. A few years ago, a crepe myrtle had a risk of fungus. We applied a treatment. When do we need to reapply it?
I'm going to make a guess. Because crepe myrtle they'll get mildew, which is kind of like a grayish white fungus on the leaves. That usually doesn't start to show up until about June. But what we're seeing a lot of right now is what's called where the stems turn black. That's actually a result of an insect pest. It's called crepe myrtle bark scale. I'd love to have you visit the plant clinic, get confirmation on this. But if it's that crepe myrtle bark scale, we're probably not going to do any treatments until probably even May, early May, late April. So you've got a little time that either send us a picture, visit us in person, but I want to get a little better diagnosis on that before we make any recommendations.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
nothing's going to happen until May or June between now and then. So you got time to figure this out.
Gotcha. Next question. Do you sell black cohosh? I'm not familiar with this.
Yeah, we should have that's native perennial.
Okay.
I again, when we talk about availability of plants can vary from day to day, week to week. So it's a plant that we do sell, but I don't know if it's there today. So you'd have to call the store closest to you. Check with our perennials people, and they can let you know if we have it now or when they expect it.
Okay. Next question. Can you recommend a fertilizer for Little Jim Magnolia and the time to fertilize?
Of Again, they usually the magnolias, southern magnolias, they start a little bit later with the warm weather, so I might hold off
Okay.
another 2, 3, even 4 weeks on fertilizing. Again, just letting the plant guide you on that. And like our Merrifield flowering plant food would be a good choice, or a lot of people love using Hollytone, which is an organic option.
Okay. Great. Well, that's our last question, David. We got through a lot, and we have 3 minutes to spare. So,
So I
uh,
wanted to just, because I brought these plants in, this is a little bit random, but I'm going to just hit a couple things super quick to
yeah.
illustrate what we're talking about. Just so I brought these in. So ranunculus, because I've had a few customers coming in pretty disappointed with this here at the clinic. So look at this beautiful flower. And I'm saying coming in disappointed. How could you possibly be disappointed with that? Absolutely gorgeous, healthy plant loaded up with buds. So ranunculus is a cool weather plant. Um, so right now in the cooler part of spring, you get beautiful, gorgeous colors that's in here. What happened to us is we hit those 3 days of 80, 85-degree temperature, and these plants just don't really handle the heat well. And so then they start to yellow and wilt down, stress out from the heat. And everybody's like, oh, that plant's no good or something. I'm like, no, it's what I call kind of a seasonal flower. They're not going to give you longevity in the garden. It's just kind of nice little pick me up in spring. And I think it's a matter of what I keep saying, realistic expectations for the plant. Nothing's wrong with the plant. It's just not adapted to 85 degrees. And when that happens to us in March, the plant's going to show distress from it. So at that point, you like either have to be knowledgeable enough to move it back into the shade or a cooler place than that. I'm going to another opposite extreme on here, right? This is our native hibiscus, beautiful, large, flowering bulbs. This is a plant that thrives in heat. So right now it's a stump. This is a perfectly healthy plant. you won't see any signs of life from this. You might look at it and say it's dead, but I don't expect to see anything from this until we get to about May. Then you're going to start see it growing, and then you're going to start seeing flowers as we go into July and August. So I'm trying to point out a little bit of the seasonality of plants and also their adaptation to different conditions. I love columbine. I have several plants in my own garden because I just absolutely love the plant. But you know what? It struggles in summer. Um, it really does not stand up well during the heat of summer. And then it starts to get mildew, wilts down, and your once absolutely gorgeous columbine plant suddenly melts down into an eyesore. Um, that doesn't mean anything's wrong with the plant. That means that that's its thing. It's a cool season spring plant, almost what I would call a spring ephemeral. But you might be in a location where you're lucky enough that you nurse it through summer. But this is one that they reseed themselves prolifically. I have them coming up everywhere in my own garden right now today. They'll thrive in the cool. And when it starts to wither away in the heat of summer, I just have to realize that's just the way it works. It doesn't mean something's wrong with the plant. It's just not behaving the way I want it to. So anyway, now my time is up. I love talking with everybody about this today, and I hope you keep tuning in for our future plant clinics.
Thank you so much, David. Everybody, thank you. Please feel free, as always, to follow up with us or contact David at the store if you have any questions. Thank you so much for attending today, David. Thanks as always. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye.